everyone. Welcome and good morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you are. It's fantastic to be connecting with all of you guys again. We want to take you into the flow, into our part 2 of the approval workflow and compliance made simple. During this session, you've met us on the previous webinar, on the last one that we have conducted. But just to make sure, in case you haven't, my name is Eran Gross. I'm managing the customer success and our solution experts in Americas for DLab. And with me on the call, I have Ariella Dondov. And actually, she's a solution expert. She's been conducting multiple of those implementations with our customers successfully to be able to enable their approval workflows capabilities. During the last session, or the last webinar, we have went about and took you on a tour about DLab's general workflows capabilities, which really attempts to solve your challenges with regards to financial approvals, discount levels, flow prices, margins, dollar amount discounts, and be able to demonstrate how does DLab aiming to solve those problems or challenges that businesses are struggling with. You can always go back into that recording. We do have that online, so feel free to watch the video and be able to go about and learn about what we have talked through that section. During today's session, we actually want to take a different angle to the approval workflows challenges. We want to take you on a tour to what DLab calls the rule-based workflow, and understand how can that be executed simultaneously with the general workflow. The rule base is definitely different and has different capabilities to the general workflows, and for the most part aims to address challenges that are with compliance of the quotes themselves, legal team, finance team, or any unique scenarios that we want to address or make sure that we have the correct boundaries and guardrails behind the scenes. We are going to also show you what we call the submit validation, a new capability we've released about a few months back about submit validation, which you're going to see in more details coming up soon with Ariella. We're going to also talk about the smart workflow. This is a capability that DLab has as part of the approval workflow, which is enabled in order to ensure that we eliminate repetitive approval workflows based on some business logic decisions that has been made on the platform or individually on each one of those workflows. Just giving you a quick glance, just refreshing everybody's memory, or in case you're seeing this for the first time. This was the organization structure that we have relied on to develop the general workflow on our previous session. I assume that most of you have somewhat similar structure, or naturally more advanced and more complex than that. And for the most part, on the previous session, we have addressed some of the challenges or needs for the actual salespeople, the sales leaders, such as the VP sales that we see on the screen, or the regional managers. But on this session, we are going to mostly look into and understand how can DLab help you solve the approval workflow needs for your legal team, for example, for your CFO, basically leadership and executives that want to be part of or make decisions or take actions on specific approvals or business logic decisions. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Ariella so that she can actually start giving us a live demo on the platform. And just before that, a quick note about housekeeping rules. There is a Q&A module enabled for this webinar, so feel free to ask your questions on the Q&A. We're going to do our best to answer those questions live on the board itself, but we are definitely going to leave some time at the end towards kind of condensing and aggregating all of those questions and answering them one by one to you. In case we haven't been able to do so, we will definitely take that question and respond back to you separately, individually on those. You can always reach out to your customer success team or DLab support@dlab.io for any further questions, and give it over to Ariella.
Hi, everyone. It's good to see everyone again. Like Iran said, we're just going to go ahead and jump right into our rule-based workflows together. So as usual, I always like to start from the absolute basic. Where are we located within the system? Okay, so we are right now in our main menu for our version settings, and we're going to go back into our workflows and validation section. And here we have our 4 tabs. In the last webinar, we covered extensively the general workflows. And now we're going to go into the next tab over, which is rule-based workflow. You'll notice I have a couple examples here. We'll touch on them a little bit later, but I want to start with just a general note. What are rule-based workflows really and best for? Like Iran mentioned, rule-based workflows are fantastic for one-off approvals. For example, things that are related to legal, or maybe a specific point contact for a specific approval. So think something along like payment terms, changes in T's and C's. Maybe there needs to be an approval by the CFO for a certain amount of net in the deal, things like that. You can even take it one step further and say, hey, we're going to go regional, right? Like this person is responsible for all quotes within a certain region. We want them to be able to take a look at them before they're fully submitted. So this is really where rule-based workflows truly shines. All right, let's try build one together, and then we'll review some of these examples. To build a rule-based workflow, we're going to go ahead and click the blue Add Approval Rule button on the top right corner. This will open the new section. I love rule-based workflows because they're really simple and they're really straight to the point. So how do we build it? First things first, description. The description is what the sales rep is going to see. So keep this really simple so that they understand exactly what this approval is based for. So for example, if we're looking at, changes in an MSA, we can write change in MSA. Active when. This is your trigger. This is your criteria, right? So this is going to be the condition to allow this workflow to activate and or enable. So this is where you're going to say, okay, this certain question was answered a certain way. So let's try something. So we have an MSA question, right? And I want this to activate if they chose no, for example. Finally, we have labels. Labels is really simple. It's kind of like a tag. I like using this a lot because you're actually able to filter by label. So when you get to the point where you have quite a few workflows, it allows you to very quickly search and identify for what workflow you're looking for. So let's say we're saying change in MSA. This is something that goes to legal. So we're going to go ahead and give it a label called legal in this case. All right. Taking a moment to remind you, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and drop them in the Q&A so that we can make sure we're getting to them after. All right, next button, immediately present for approval to all levels. You'll notice that this is very similar to the general workflows feature that has the same name, and it really functions in the exact same way. What this button does is that it allows you to kind of skip and offer someone who's higher up in the hierarchy the ability to approve before maybe someone else approved it. So for example, let's say you put a manager first and then the CFO next. If you say immediately present for approval to all levels, then the CFO will still see this pop up in their dashboard. And if they happen to want to approve it before the manager, they can go ahead and do that as well. All right, now let's talk about the actual hierarchy, the structure of the approvals themselves. We call these steps. The reason we call them steps is because you have the ability to actually input multiple steps. So you can go through a chain of hierarchy for certain approvals. In some cases, you might only want to use step one, right? Like let's say you want this to only go to one person and you're good to go. But in other cases, you might want to do what I mentioned before. It goes to the manager first, and then it goes to legal, and then it goes to the CEO, so on and so forth. All right. So in step one, what we're going to do is we're going to click the drop down and you can add certain users. Now, very similarly to the approver in general workflows, this is a specific person. You have two main options here. The first one is either the user's manager. So this is whoever is submitting the quote, their manager, as defined in DealHub. Or you can choose another specific user from your user list. So if we go back, for example, to our structure, if we want to go to legal, then we're going to want Aaron Schmidt to be our approver. So for the sake of this change in MSA, we can say, all right, I wanted to first go to the user's manager, and then I wanted to go to Aaron Schmidt, who is our head of legal. You can also add more than one person. So let's say in this second step, I want to do Aaron and let's say Alex Anderson. And then you have the option of requires approval of. You have two options here. The first one is all of the approvers or just one of the approvers. And it's pretty straightforward, but I'm going to explain it anyways. All of the approvers means that every single person that you've selected in this step must approve this quote. One of the approvers means that only one out of the group has to actually go ahead and approve it. All right, let's look at some of our examples, see how they're built. And then I want to show you what it looks like from the sales mode side so you can see what it looks like from the sales rep's perspective. All right, our first one is going to be non-standard payment terms. We're going to do two more legal ones, and then I'm going to show you a couple of other ones as well. So this one's quite simple. We're going to say non-standard payment terms. We've used a playbook question that allows a sales rep to choose the payment terms. And we're going to tell the system, well, if they don't choose, right, this exclamation point and equal signs is a not. So if they don't choose this particular answer, we want this to go to legal for approval. We've labeled it legal, and we've put Aaron Schmidt, our head of legal, as our first step. For this example, we didn't have anyone else we needed to get approval from, but if we did, we can always add either another step or choose an additional person in the dropdown. One more example, I mentioned this a little bit earlier when we were doing MSA, but for example, T's and C's, right? Like we can tell the sales rep, hey, you have the option to change the terms and conditions of this deal. However, if you choose a certain answer, we want to make sure that legal gets eyes on this. So our description is going to be modified T's and C's, makes it really clear to the sales rep what it is that this approval is for. And we're going to activate it if they chose anything but no for this particular question. So you really have a lot of flexibility here, right? You can choose any question. You can also use something standard, which I'll show you next from the system. All right, let's look at it from a financial point of view. Let's say you want to have an approval for anything over a total size of net for the deal. So our description here is net over 1 million. And what we're telling the system is if our general total net for the entire deal is greater than 1 million, we're going to trigger a two-step approval. First step will be legal. Second step will be to Jenny Smith, who from our hierarchy, Jenny Smith is our CFO. I've also added the button here, immediately present for approval to all levels, because what I want to tell the system is, hey, if Jenny happens to see this before Aaron and she gives us a thumbs up, cool, Aaron's off the hook. We're going to just make it really efficient and quick in this particular case. I went ahead and labeled it financial so that if I want to filter for it after, I can find this really quickly. The final example I want to show you is something that's regional. This one's kind of cool. I like it because I know that a lot of organizations have different teams depending on region. So you're able to actually create user groups within Deal Hub and classify what group or what region, for example, a particular user is in. So the user that I'm using right now is in the Southeast region. I did that because I want to show you how this one fires. But what I did for this one is in the description, I wrote Southeast approval. So essentially what I'm telling the system is as soon as the user is in the Southeast region, this quote is going to go to Victoria Harris, who's the head of this region, for approval, just to kind of make sure that we have eyes on particular teams. Nice use case. If you have pod structures, for example, you can create pods within Deal Hub and have the head of the pod review quotes for their particular pod. So a lot of flexibility, a lot of great use cases that you can use rule-based workflows for. All right, taking a quick break, once again reminding you, if you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A. Let's move on to the sales rep side and see what it looks like when these are actually live. So I've prepared here a playbook. I've closed some of the question groups, so it's not overwhelming. I just kind of want to show you how these look from the sales mode side. So we have this section called contract management, right? Here are questions that we did for some of the legal, the financial stuff, etc. So I'm going to answer some of these questions, and I want you to keep an eye on this approval workflow section on the bottom. We'll get to the ones that are already here in a moment. So the non-standard payment terms, right? We have our payment terms here. We set Deal Hub to configure and to show a default. right? This is what we kind of want to recommend the sales rep do. But as a sales rep, I'm going to say, you know, I don't want to do 30 days. I want to do 60 days in this case. As soon as I made that selection, it triggered the non-standard payment terms rule that we had set before. And the good part about this is that it doesn't just show what the approval value is, but it's showing me exactly the person that it's going to. So there's a lot of visibility and a lot of transparency here that's actually, I think, really beneficial because it helps streamline the entire process for you. We have another one that's changes in the MSA. So do I wish to modify, let's say, the T's and C's? I'm going to say, yeah, I want to modify them. And that triggered the other one. You'll notice that there are two other workflows that triggered as well, Southeast approval. Like I said, the user that I'm on right now is part of the Southeast team. So it automatically triggered that approval. And my total net for the deal is over $1 million. So that triggered the final of the 4. So we have everything here. It's very visible. You can see all of the steps. So if it's a 2-step, you can see both people in here. All right, that was a lot, but that really is what rule-based workflows is really amazing for and truly shines in. I'm going to take us back into our approval workflow section, and I'm going to move on to submit validation. All right, submit validation. For those who don't know, I'm going to make it really, I'm going to take us all the way back to what validations are. So a validation is a way to block the quote creator from submitting a quote. So its primary use really is to confirm that no quotes are being created against company guidelines. So think about it like this. Let's say the sales rep is choosing a certain product, but that product must be accompanied by a support package. So if that support package wasn't selected, we want to block that user from being able to submit that quote. We don't even want it to go to approval because that's just against company guidelines. They have to choose both things together. So how do we do this? Once again, you're going to click on the button on the top right corner, add validation rule. You'll notice that a lot of them look really similar, which I think is great because it keeps things really streamlined. So I'll run through this a little bit quicker so I don't, talk your head off. Description, same as before. Right? Description, this is the title of the message that will appear in the validation. This is what the sales rep will see as the title of the validation. Active when, once again, this is your criteria for activation. This is the rule, the condition that must be met for this validation to exist and to activate and work. Labels, again, this will allow you to tag your validation and you still have the functionality to filter by the label according to what you need to search for. And finally, and this is my favorite section, you get a nice free text bubble. So you can really get creative here. Every organization has its own ways to provide validations for its sales reps. So you really can kind of put in whatever information you want. This is just a basic rich text section. So you can type in, hey, XYZ, right? Like your message here. You can use a lot of the formatting tools to change font, size. You can also put in source code for HTML if you want to get real fancy. And finally, what I really like is that you can also drop in parameters. So for those who don't know, a parameter is a custom and dynamic piece of text. So for example, you can pull in here different calculations, different net totals. You can also pull in answers from the playbook. So you can say, hey, you chose this answer from the playbook. Please change it to whatever, right? So a lot of flexibility in this message. All right, I'm going to show you an example that I already built out, and then I'm going to show you what it looks like when it's being triggered from the sales side. So I'm using the exact example that I mentioned before, which is requires support package. Want to keep things consistent for y'all. So in here, what I did is the description is quite simple, requires support package, and I activated it in a certain case. So I said, if the total net of a particular tag of products called software is over $100, and my support selection is not a support package. So in this case, select is my not applicable, not chosen answer. Then I want to activate this validation. I've labeled it support. And the message that I wrote is, you selected over $100 of software products and did not select a support package. Please choose a support package in order to submit this quote. Let me show you what that looks like when we're trying to submit a quote. So I'm back here. I've selected my product, and in my support section, you'll notice I did not select any of the 3 options for support. So let's say this is the condition, I'm ready to go. I'm gonna go ahead and click submit proposal up on top, and boom, I got a validation error. It's nice, it's red, it's very visible. You really can't miss it. And not only that, not only can you not miss it, but the system will not allow the user to submit the proposal until this validation error is corrected. So you'll notice here, I have my first one, okay? My message popped up, it's telling me exactly what I need to know. Great, I'm gonna go ahead and fix this. In my support section, I'm gonna select basic for my support, and now I'm gonna try to submit my proposal one more time. Because I have approval workflows triggering, the system will allow me to add a note. So your sales reps can kind of write, their thoughts, their reasoning. I'm gonna keep things simple just for the sake of this demo, and I'm gonna write, please approve this quote because of X. Ideally, you'd want to fill the X with something, not just leave the letter. All right, I'm going to click save, and my quote has been submitted to my approver. I'm going to hand it off to Eran. He's my approver in this case, and he's going to show you what it looks like from his side.
Great, thank you, Ariella. So I'm going to be taking over, and I'm impersonating at the moment within DLab, basically the approver for that quote. There are a couple of things that I wanted to show you. First and foremost, obviously, I'm going to get an email. This is a predefined email, but I would get pretty much the same email. We went over that, and we can look into that again. But there is a way to custom make this email, starting from the subject of the email, what kind of values and parameters are getting added to the subject title. If you want to show the margin, if you want to show the discount level, this is where we can actually do that. We can show what is the approval that is being has been triggered in this use case. This is a net over 1 million. We can see the comments from the seller, from the salesperson, actually of the submitter of the quote that has been asked, and the reasoning to approve. If there are any comments, or if there were any previous approvers into the quotes that they have added any comments by themselves, those comments are going to be made available here. We can see some information about the proposal itself, and in this case, we are only showing the total gross of the deal and the total net. We can obviously configure that to demonstrate any values or any custom field that you have set up in your environment. We can show the entire products list. Basically, think about that as similar to the pricing tables that you have inside your output document or deal room. It is very much the same configuration that can be applied here. This is all even can be fully custom made with more branding in case you need that, with the logos of the companies and so forth. But the cool part naturally is that you can either approve, reject, to view the quote, open up DLab directly from the email itself, or alternatively, you can just do reply to this email, and immediately after the reply, on the editing of the email, just either type in approved or type in reject, and that will basically action the same way as clicking on one of those buttons. What I want to show you is that this is for the most part, I assume some of you are somewhat familiar with this capability of DLab. What I want to show is that as a manager, if I've decided to get my approval or manage all of my approval from DLab itself, I would want to do that from this, potentially from this page. We can see that I have this is my sales mode open up. I am now connected as Aaron to the platform. And let me just refresh the screen, just making sure that we're getting everything in motion. I'm going to click on my pending approval, and I can see that I've got a couple of quotes here that requires my approval. I can see the last one that it came in is under a discount. So I do have a very good understanding right from the get-go when glancing into this table, which one is more demanding, what's the status, who actually sent it over my way, why it's waiting for me. I can also see something very important is that small icon. And I think some of us are so used to, there is so much data on the screen, but this end is very much, it's definitely very important. We talked about in the general workflow, the capability to immediately present approvals to all of my approvers is critical here. If you are part of the approval and it's not yet your turn to go in and approve, that small hand of a current approver in a workflow would not be there. So essentially, you get a very good understanding if you are required to take action on those approvals that we see on the screen. You can definitely go into the quote itself by clicking the view and be able to understand in the approval workflow. First, you can see the comments up at the top. You can definitely see what are the approvals that has been triggered for this quote. If you decide that you want to approve out from this screen, you can simply do that here on the top. Okay. Another option is by going back on the breadcrumb menu at the top. Just go here to one of them, and if you want to be very quick on that, you can just click the approve here, add your comment here, and for the most part, that is about it. Your quote creator, the seller, is going to receive an email acknowledging that the receipt of this approval, and as well as the approve or reject of the action we've taken out there. Alongside with that, with Salesforce and with Microsoft, with MSD, Microsoft Dynamics integration at the moment, we will sync all of those actions. So all of the quotes approval elements are going to get synced over to your CRM into a custom object. Okay, you will be able to get a very good understanding for each one of those approvals in each one of those quotes, or under the opportunity, depending to which object DLab is integrated and syncing back to. A good understanding, and even furthermore than what we even presented here on the screen. And I'll give you a sneak peek into something DLab is working on and is soon going to be made available for you, which is definitely very exciting news for us, expanding on the approval workflows capabilities. But before that, I do want to cover some other elements from the approval on the approval itself. I'm going back into the admin side, and I want to go into some elements that we have talked about briefly on the general workflow, but I want to make sure that it's clear, because it is definitely aligns to what we call in DLab the smart workflow. And essentially, the smart workflow is there to help you eliminate any repetitive workflows. Our end goal is to make sure that your workflows are seamless behind the scenes. We want to trigger when it's really required, but when it's not, and when we already got an approval for the quote and we just duplicated the quote to make a small adjustment to the terms and condition, we want to make sure it's going to fly through. We don't want to stop the process. We want to make sure that we give our sales team a seamless experience as they go through DLab, acknowledging that the approval has already been made to that specific quote on those specific terms and conditions. And that smart workflow is really what makes the difference. Some of you may remember in the workflow settings, we used to have a section for enabling smart workflow. It is now not on the UI itself. It's by default enabled on all of our platforms. So out of the box, it is already enabled. A couple of things that it will provide you from a capabilities, and I'm going to show you also, give you a reference where you can actually get more details on it on our knowledge base. So smart workflow on our support page or knowledge base is really on the section of, if you're going to go back into the approval workflow section, we do have the section here for the smart workflow. There is a very good explanation here, way better than I can explain and go in details during this webinar, with a lot of scenarios and examples that you can really look into. And at least from my perspective, working with many clients of ours, most of them really aligns to your specific needs. But the first one that I want to speak about and talk about without getting you into the document itself is really about the tolerance. We have made a mention on that on the previous call, but just want to reiterate that and make sure that we are all aligned about this awesome capability. As part of the general workflow setup, and this is one of those approval workflows, we took some of them out. We wanted to make sure that the screen is not overly crowded. One of the capabilities in the general workflow, which we talked about on a previous session, was about the tolerance. Okay, what does the tolerance do out there, and how does that align to the smart workflow? Actually, pretty much in a very native way, we want to make sure that we have provided our sales team some sort of boundaries in which they can maneuver and discount the deal, and allowed our regional managers and our sales VPs and our CFO and our CRO, we gave them those thresholds in which they can approve the quotes. So as you can see, we have our sales EMEA and North America. They will need to get their manager's approval, or actually, it's actually a specific approver here. We can see Victoria and Robert for anything that is up to 10%. Okay, they will need to go and seek their approval. But what if we went about and we duplicated the quote, and we simply want to make sure that we just add incremental change, so it's only a 1% increase. In that case, we as a business, or I am now as an admin on the platform, want to pretty much say, hey, if this is up to 5% increase or decrease from the previous approval, I'm good. I don't want to get that overly again into the approval process. From my perspective, it should be automatically approved, and I just want to make sure that it runs through and it flies into the client as soon as possible. I don't want to get delayed and re-approving that. Overall, it looks good to me. So as a business, I can make sure I can make that decision and just change the tolerance here to 5%. That would mean that if I have provided a 10% discount and I've sought my manager approval and he approved it, as I go in as a salesperson, duplicate the quote, if I'm not gonna make any changes to the 10%, obviously there will be no approval. If I'll be making a change into the discount, and I'm gonna apply additional 3% discount, the approval will not be required. The salesperson is going to see on the screen that approval is not required. The quote has already been approved. And from that perspective, the quote will not go to the approval process. In case I'm going to go into 5.1, 5.2, 6% and upwards, that is where the approval will get triggered and will be sent out to the manager again. I can definitely change not only or make the tolerance to be based on the percentage, but can be also based on the value. Okay, so I know my deals, my deal size, I know my segment of business, and I want to say that from my perspective, as long as it's 5K up or down, again, I want to auto approve that. I don't want to delay the process. And this is actually pretty cool because in this case, even though I'm measuring the sales discount, I can actually set the tolerance based on the dollar value. So this is a very good example of how this DLab is able to work with two basically activation values and be able to be very creative about how do we gauge our team's response or approval matrices. You have a very good explanation about the approval tolerance out there on the screen on the help, and this is definitely very valuable. There are a couple of things though that you need to take into account when you're setting up the tolerance, as well as with the entire setup of your workflow. So, for example, a capability which is one of our heavily used capabilities in the platform, evaluating each product separately. What that would do, and as you can see, as I've enabled that, my tolerance has been disabled. Okay, the reason being is that when we evaluate each product separately, we are actually pretty much saying, hey, I don't want to look at the overall deal size or the overall discount of the deal itself. I don't want to look into the total net of the deal and be able to set my approvals. I actually want to evaluate each line separately. And DLUB at the moment relies on their approval, on their overall deal size, on the overall deal settings. And for that purpose, when we set the approval workflow to be evaluated each product separately, we will disable the tolerance, and with that will not be made available. So if you have evaluate each product separately, every quote that is going to be sent out, duplicated, or quote sent out, approved, duplicated, will require a reapprover of the quote. You can definitely separate in case you have a different geos or line of businesses. You can definitely break down those approvals and give some more territories, slightly more freedom, but instead of using the evaluate each product separately, using the totals and then set the tolerance accordingly. Okay, cool. We'll discard those changes and a quick recap about what I believe we talked about that on the first webinar, but just want to make sure that we are all on the same page and kind of rehashing it out. The workflow settings are here to assist you also to gain control as to not only from a individual approval perspective, but overall, how do you as an admin control your entire approval workflows setup? You can decide on the order, whether to execute parallel. Basically, if there is no order of a sequence of events, all of those approvals are going to get triggered pretty much at the same event at the same time, or whether to set those up as a general or a rule base first. In the event that we're going to set it up on either, let's take the general workflow first, only the general workflows are going to be sent out in the email to the approver and as well as displayed on the dashboard. Everything else that has to do with the rule base will not get presented yet. It's going to be in pending mode until all of the approvals or rejections are being made to the general workflows applicable to that specific quote. Okay, vice versa, same things applies for the rule base, but for the most part, what I've seen from my experience, most of our customers are using the parallel capability. Run the workflow as an opportunity owner. Very important when you have sales operation, when you have power users on the sales team, a deal desk maybe, that actually are creating quotes on behalf of your salespeople. There are some events where you will need to go in and maybe have a separate team creating the quotes in favor of the account executive. And in that case, you want to make sure that you don't rely on the actual user creating the quote roles and his discount levels, but you actually want to look into that from an opportunity owner. So if we have our sales manager responsible for that opportunity and we have a team supporting him, creating the quote on his behalf, we want to make sure that we set it up to be yes, so that we can take advantage of that account executive's approval thresholds versus the person who actually creating and submitting the quote on his behalf. That is where setting up, running the approval workflow as the opportunity owner will get very meaningful and very important. Enable role impersonation, very important capability when it comes to testing out your workflows, but as well as giving you more flexibility to control the approvals on specific conditions. We can have one question that can be set from the playbook. You can just specify the question, and that question will be will override the approval, the user's position in the system, so that we can simulate the specific thresholds and definitions. Another capability that I want to show you, going back to the discard that. I'm going to save that. Another capability that I want to show you on the general workflow, which sometimes gets overlooked, is the validate workflow. Validate workflow really helps you for the most part. If I'm going to make any mistakes out there, definitely I won't be able to save that. We can see that the entire workflow is marked in red. In case I've activated the version, make changes to my roles. If I've deleted users and that role of the platform does not even exist anymore. If I'm evaluating a value, that the value is not available. If I'm evaluating a condition here, a question that I've deleted, that will all get marked on the quote level itself. So that is where the system will tell me, hey, you've got a very bad setup out there. You need to fix that before making progress. But there is something that the system can also do for you, which is the general workflow relies a lot on the user setup, on the roles behind the scenes, and making sure that each one of those roles that has been set up here with the respective users is super critical and super important for the general workflow. And for that purpose, we have what we call the validate workflow, a capability that will scan through all of your approval workflows and give you indication about some issues in which the approvals are not going to get triggered. In this case, we can see that we have a couple of mentioning out here. It's going to refer to general workflow. It's going to tell me that it's going to give me a reference that about the total sales discount, exceeded limits, and it's going to give me a reference to the roles themselves. In this case, we are getting notifications. Again, this is a demo environment, that there are no users in a specific roles that has been created as a reference in this approval workflow, which definitely makes sense. In this case, this is just a demo environment. Now, let me get you to the exciting part. This is definitely something that is hopefully going to get all of you guys excited about. We are super happy to announce that we are going to release soon a feature that we call the deal desk. Name may change, keep in mind, but this capability of the deal desk is really about empowering your deal desk team, your approvers, to really be able to take actions quicker and get a better insights about your approval workflows status. You will be able to see a dashboard, and I'm going to give you a sneak peek into a mockup that we have that the team is currently working on, subject to change naturally, but also will eliminate some of those impersonation capabilities to go out and delegate some of those pending approvals to other approvers behind the scenes. And there it is. Under the approval workflow, there will be a dashboard that is going to give you a capability to expand each one of those approvals, pending approvals, with the same pretty much look and feel on the higher level, but you can definitely expand into it and actually get a very immediate glance into the approval itself. You don't have to go into the quote itself to see the status of the quote. You can actually see everything right on that dashboard. You can highlight some of those approvals and delegate them to another team members, or you can simply on their behalf approve or reject on the screen itself by using those up and down that you see on the screen. Another cool capability that you may see on the screen here, which may seem kind of new, is the SLA, the approver SLA. We are going to add the capability into the system to be able to define what are going to be the acceptable thresholds for your organization to manage the approvals. You can specify what's going to be what means a green. So in this case, we can see up to 8 hours, for example. You can specify what it means to be orange or what it means to be red. And that will give you a very good indication about which approvals are being overly basically their time spent until approval was longer than expected. It exceeded the SLA of the organizations, and you either want to take actions on their behalf, or it will give you an opportunity to reevaluate the setup of those approvals and whether changes needs to be made in order to ensure that everything falls within the green SLA boundaries that the organization is set in place. With that, I want to summarize this session and move us into the Q&A section. We have presented you over those two sessions both the general workflows and the rule-based workflows and submit validation, which we take as a small capability of the platform, yet very powerful at times. With that said, there is very, very much, and we acknowledge that working with most of our customers, there are some very unique scenarios that our customers need to put in place, which definitely requires the assistance of our team, or at least get some thought process and brainstorming together to get that going. We're always here to help you, either through our customer success team, your customer success manager, or either to our support. Either path will lend you guys into the correct solution. But we will definitely want to make sure that you're using the approval workflows to the best of their use, and making sure that it supports your business needs. And with that, I'm going to take it over, and we're going to switch over to the Q&A. We had a couple of questions that came out from the audience that we want to quickly address those. So I'll take the first ones, and then Ariella and I are going to juggle between us as we're going to go to the rest of them. So the first one that I wanted to that has been asked, well, do all of the approvers need to be added into need to be added as users in DLab, or can they just approve via email only? This is a common question that we are getting, and yes, all approver must have a licensed user in DLab. They can certainly only approve through email, but we have to be able to match their email address to the login information that we have inside DLab. There is no way that DLab can make the correlation unless we have that set up. So every user, every approver needs to be also set up with the same login information as their email. Another question that came up, does the order of the rule-based workflow matters? Yes, some of you may have seen the capability to joggle up and down the approval. So I'm going up to the rule-based, the capability to move things around. Most of the time, it is more for organizing the approvals on the correct order of things. Definitely use the labels. When we have a lot of workflows, it makes a lot of difference. So being able to quickly jumping into specific approvals, but the order between them doesn't really matter much. They're going to get triggered on the same event. I'm passing it over to you, Ariella, for the next question.
All right, the next question we got is, why am I seeing a red exclamation mark in sales mode over my approval workflow trigger? So I actually wanted to pull up an example of what this looks like, because this can happen. So I wanted to show you what that looks like live. So this might be a little familiar to some, but it's okay because we can fix it. So this is what that red exclamation point was in the question. So what this means when you see this is essentially there's a problem in the workflow. So usually it has to do with the users and the approval workflow hierarchy. So there are a couple of different ways we can fix this depending on what the problem is. So I'm going to kind of try and list them out for you. The first one is if you happen to be using the role type manager as opposed to a particular person, you have to make sure that the quote submitter actually has a manager configured. So if you're writing, this needs to go to your manager, but you don't actually have a manager in Deal Hub, it's going to cause a problem with the approval workflow, thus leading to a red exclamation mark. Another problem that could cause that red exclamation mark is if you're using, say, a general workflow, you need to make sure that all of the roles included in your hierarchy are actually filled out and included in your user group. So make sure that you're not, adding someone that doesn't actually exist. Again, you want approvers to be real human beings. So make sure that they're actually added so that there aren't any confusions within the system and the approval workflow. Something else, make sure that all of your approvers are active users. So there is a way to deactivate users. You want to make sure that anyone who's an approver is live and active in Deal Hub and can actually go ahead and make these approval requests happen. Finally, and this is like the number one thing that I see for general workflows, which we covered a little bit in the last webinar, you want to always make sure that there is someone that is closing the loop of the hierarchy. What does that mean? Inevitably, when you have a tiered structure of say 10, 20, 30, 50%, there has to be at least one person, one user in Deal Hub that can approve anything, right? This could be any person in your hierarchy, but it has to be one person that will close the loop. So every time you build those workflows, make sure that you have a final line with a person that does not have an approver, because they are the final approver. And their value in the general workflow is the maximum value. So for example, if we're talking about discounts, your CEO could potentially go up to 100%, and they don't need an approver above that. So those are just some of the most common scenarios, but if you're not able to fix that red exclamation point, you know, that's what we're here for. So don't hesitate to reach out for support. And I'm going to hand it back to you for the next question.
All right, awesome. So the next question is definitely something that we get a lot, is if there is an hierarchy in the approvals, can the top level manager override a workflow? Okay, so if I have 3 approvers in my workflows, can my manager come in and just override everybody downstream? So let's take this use case. I'm going to add a couple of other folks out there to the approval. Okay, so the question is whether Jasmine can come in here now and approve on everybody's behalf and make sure that we get that quote out of the door as quickly as possible. The answer is yes. How do we do that? So first, I want to separate that between the email notification that is sent out and what is presented on the dashboard that we saw before. So making sure that we are on the same page. On the email, we will only send email on the specific step that is basically the manager's turn to take action. So we won't be issuing emails from the very moment to all of the steps. So the first person who's going to get the email will be Aaron. The second one will be Alex, and the next one is going to be Jasmine, in that order based on the approval. Obviously, if Alex rejected the quote, Jasmine will not get an approval at all, and it's going to go back to the seller or to the account executive to make changes. But from the dashboard perspective, we can actually make sure it is visible to all of the levels from the very first moment, and allow Jasmine to come in and take over the approval chain and just approve on everybody's behalf. The way to do that would be using this capability, immediately presenting the approval to all levels. Once we select that, again, no emails is going to be sent out to Jasmine, but Jasmine can go over to our approval dashboard, see the quote, and she's able to take action on it right from the get-go. Okay, so this is the capability that it somewhat helps you streamline the process. Naturally, there is always the capability to go in, and if that specific toggle of presenting is not enabled for that manager, there is always the capability for the seller to go into the quote itself. And if you guys have good connections, and if they have good connections with their SVPs or their approvers, they can actually share that with them directly and ask for, I can select Jasmine, and I can select here, and I can send her I know it didn't land your email yet, but would be awesome if you can go about and approve that. Okay. There is another question that came in that is very exciting, actually, and I want to make sure that we cover that, because I feel this is definitely something very, very cool that some of you may take advantage of. One of the question is as follows. It's a bit long, but I'll just read that over. If I want to have a quote reviewed by a deal desk person before it submits to the actual approver, okay, what is the best practice to go about and do that? Okay, so essentially, we want to make sure that we have a editable quote that only a deal desk person can go in, make the correct adjustments or review, be able to set something in the system so that it will allow the seller to move on into his approval process workflow. The way to overcome that or to develop that would be by creating a question that is only available or only visible to a deal desk person. You will do that by the conditional presentation or defining the question or the question. There are multiple ways to go about that in the playbook. And you will have a question that is only available for deal desk. It can be reviewed by deal desk, yes, no, a radio button. And once you have that set up, you will only allow deal desk person to go in and make that toggling between reviewed or not. The second part to the answer to the solution would be using the submit validation. So you can prevent submitting the quote from a salesperson unless that question of reviewed by deal desk team has been set to yes in the playbook itself. So using the two combination of the playbook question that is only being made available for deal desk alongside with submit validation, you can accomplish that and make sure that you get an always a thumbs up from the deal desk before submitting the quote. We are on time to our basically to our webinar. I want to thank you all for staying all the way through with us. We will definitely extend some of the response to some of those questions over directly to the folks who asked those and get those out to everybody as part of the recording that we're going to release out. With that said, I want to thank Ariella. Thank you very much for taking us onto the tour of the rule base, and we look forward to seeing you again on the next webinar coming up very soon. Thank you all.